What do the games Evergrace, Stupid Invaders, and The Bouncer all have in common? These three terrible games were all released in 2001, but they were not the year's worst games. At least, not according to Next Generation Magazine, who gave all three of these stinkers 2 stars out of 5. Yeah, as crazy as it sounds, Next Generation gave 25 different games a lower score than The Bouncer. I'm talking about the dreaded 1 star. And today we're gonna go through all of these reviews and read the meanest, nastiest, and snarkiest quotes from all 25 of these supposedly awful games. This is Next Generation's 1-star reviews, and these are the 25 worst games of 2001, and a little of 2002.
A great fury must come for the goodness of all. You will not comprehend it now, but the very existence of the age it spawns will justify all that went before.
Up first we have Army Men, Sarge's Heroes 2 on PlayStation 2. Sarge's gang has now made its appearance on PlayStation 2, but aside from the requisite graphical improvements, this debut is just as bland as their performance elsewhere. As with most games in this series, there are problems with the control. It's textbook bad, jerky, twitchy, and otherwise unresponsive. Shooting's a drag, and so is selecting a weapon. Simply moving the men around and completing minor tasks can be frustrating, and the multiplayer modes are equally non-compelling. The high points are superficial. There's plenty of funny, tongue-in-cheek toy soldier humor, and the CG work is pretty good. Still, the time spent on the trappings would have been better spent fixing the actual gameplay. Number 2, B-17 Flying Fortress, the Mighty Eighth on PC. Although much anticipated by the flight sim community, B-17 finally arrives as a buggy, utterly frustrating mess. Crashes, flaws, and errors pop up at nearly every turn, giving the impression that the game was never even introduced to QA, let alone given the high-intensity testing such a complex title demands. From wildly inconsistent AI to the incredible disappearing crew members, there is just too much wrong with B-17 to make any attempt at perseverance worthwhile. In the end, neither B-17's ambitious design nor its historical pedigree can disguise the fact that this is a bug-infested, blatantly unfinished misfire that barely deserves a second look. Number 3, Bass Rush Dream on Dreamcast. This is obviously meant to compete directly with Sega's fantastic arcade fishing titles like Bass Fishing and Marine Fishing, but unfortunately, it just can't. For starters, this is a pure fishing simulator than Sega's more arcade-like offerings, meaning that there are fewer fish and they are quite reluctant to strike. There's also very little to look at in the underwater environments. Heck, there isn't even any music unless you have a fish on the line. Put simply, it's incredibly boring. It's sad, we love fishing games, but we can't think of a single reason to own this one. Roll it back. Number 4, Batman Beyond, The Return of the Joker on PlayStation. Ubisoft has released Batman Beyond for PlayStation. In a related story, Batman's creator Bob Kane will be exhumed from his grave and fitted with a newer, larger coffin that will allow him more space in which to properly roll over. The mark of a bad game is when it fails on many levels. Batman Beyond fails on every level. It shoehorns the Dark Knight detective into an insipid side-scrolling adventure that marches the parade straight down Cliché Street. It's so generic that with minimal retooling, this game could have easily starred any hero from Wolverine to Speedy Gonzales. This is, in fact, beyond putrid. Number 5, Ephemeral Fantasia on PlayStation 2. This began as a Dreamcast title before shifting to PlayStation 2, but still has the distinction of being the first traditional RPG for the system. Honestly, that doesn't mean a hell of a lot. RPG fans will tell you that it's not the graphics, but the storyline that counts. They obviously haven't played Ephemeral Fantasia. Unfortunately, you have to wade through choppy frame rates, a mediocre battle system, first-generation Dreamcast quality graphics, and a labyrinthian town layout in order to find any fun in this otherwise original and clever plot. Don't be fooled by the cute characters on the box promising RPG goodness. You'll find none of it here. Keep moving. Number 6. Freedom, First Resistance on PC. Based on the works of Anne McCaffrey, Freedom manages to take a passable concept and turn it into a barely competent mishmash of design concepts so half-baked they collapse. The game is an odd hybrid, combining basic third-person exploration, inane dialogue trees, clunky combat, and some of the worst AI this side of Daikatana. Dull, flawed, and lacking in almost every area, Freedom, First Resistance is as painful and inept a game as you're likely to find. With games like these, Earth deserves to be wiped out by aliens. Number 7. Half-Life Blue Shift on PC. The Half-Life udder is starting to look red and raw thanks to all the milking Sierra has been given it. Just a few months after the unnecessary Platinum Pack, Sierra offers up the ridiculous Half-Life Blue Shift, a standalone game that was originally intended for Dreamcast. Beyond the dated visuals, though, is some very boring gameplay. There are a few scripted events, but many of them are poorly done, with invulnerable soldiers standing stock still until you enter their proximity. There's no final showdown with anybody at all, and we're able to complete the adventure on our second go-around in less than 90 minutes. Don't bother. Number 8. Kabuki Warriors on Xbox. This is a good example of a really bad fighting game. While the graphics are occasionally superlative, the extremely simplistic and sluggish gameplay dooms this title from the start. All would have been well if it had been fun or even remotely challenging. Unfortunately, even the tour mode, in which you travel to different towns to fight, can be beaten in under an hour on your first try. Look, just buy Dead or Alive 3 and forget this unhappy mess. Number 9. Last Kingdom on PC. The massively multiplayer online role-playing genre is dominated by 3 giants: EverQuest, Ultima Online, and Asheron's Call. For a newcomer to break in, the game had better offer something special. Unfortunately, Last Kingdom doesn't even come close. In fact, it's ugly and boring with minimal RPG elements and an unbelievably high latency, even on a broadband connection. In this epic world, only 16 NPCs can exist for things like buying and selling items or offering quests. And they're so bland that you could replace them with a stone pedestal and no one would notice. Finally, Last Kingdom is missing one vital element: role-playing. Almost all player dialogue consists of offers to sell an auction item. Pathetic. Number 10. Mike Tyson's Boxing on PlayStation. Already a dubious position having Mike Tyson's name on it, this boxing game goes on to offer nothing else of merit. You unlock the other fighters in showcase mode, and they're standard fare except for one glaring flaw: the CPU AI is non-existent. The Versus and Career modes are a different story, since opponents actually fight back. Not well, but at least they try. Finally, load times are atrociously long. Although Mike Tyson's reputation would be hard-pressed to get any lower, this game manages to do just that. This blows. Number 11. Moto Racer World Tour on PlayStation. Moto Racer World Tour is clearly an effort to siphon some of the success of Excite Bike 64. But like most of the bikes it features, this title is mired in muck. The main problem with Moto Racer is the horrible control. The bikes constantly oversteer, and though they can be slightly modified in the garage, the resulting differences are minimal. The camera only serves to worsen the poor gameplay, as it often swings so wide on a turn that the track is no longer in sight, instead treating you to a clear view of the irrelevant, pixelated background. Even if this had come out at the launch of the original PlayStation, it still would have seemed weak. Its release now is absurd. Number 12, Motocross Mania on PlayStation. Motocross Mania originally entered the world as an average, value-priced PC game, and now makes its return as a PlayStation port. In other words, it's a rather pricey coaster. What began as a bare-bones physics model has been stripped down to the marrow. You might as well be controlling a scooter, tank, or gyrocopter for all the personality that's established here. On PC, it faced almost no competition. Going head-to-head against the console contenders, though, Motocross Mania quickly falls behind the pack. This is a stripped-down racer running on fumes, which is exactly what you'd have to be inhaling before purchasing this game. Number 13, NBA 2 Night on Dreamcast. When it comes to sports games on next-generation consoles, it seems to be a case of feast or famine. And sadly, Konami's NBA 2 Night is another undercooked piece of software. The list of complaints here is as long as Shaquille O'Neal's wingspan, but the worst offender has to be the animation. Players appear to glide rather than run across the court. It's the dunk animation, however, that shows the most blatant lack of polish. The AI is severely lacking too. That quick press of the turbo button seems to confuse the defense 90% of the time, leaving you a free path to the hoop. This dreary effort can't even tie NBA 2K1 shoelaces. Don't waste your money.
To create the most realistic football games means working with the pros. Sometimes that can lead to problems.
Marshall, one fumble clip. Just one.
No, I don't fumble.
Just one time.
No.
I mean, just...
I do not fumble.
Fortunately, we're real problem solvers.
Hey, Marshall!
Rated E for everyone.
PlayStation.
And we're back with number 14, NCAA GameBreaker 2001 on PlayStation 2. In the world of sports games, we're often forced to choose between the lesser of two evils. For instance, take the dilemma faced by PlayStation 2 owners, who also happen to be hardcore college football fans. They have to choose between GameBreaker 2001 and, just doing without. The graphics are subpar, the AI is clunky, the play calling screens are unwieldy, and the game is nowhere near as deep as Madden. Simply put, GameBreaker 2001 is nearly as pathetic as the GameDay that spawned it. Speaking of which, number 15, NFL GameDay 2001 on PlayStation 2. If this is a joke, we're not laughing. We've been curious why 989 has been so closed-mouthed about their sports line on PlayStation 2, with no screens available, no details, not even given a hype-filled press release to announce any of the game's imminent arrivals. Now we painfully understand the silence. 989 Studios has released an unfinished, uninspired, pathetic mess of a game for its loyal devotees to lap up unsuspectingly. And boy, is it gonna leave a sour taste in a lot of mouths. The whole exercise is pathetically unforgivable, and with a little luck, this review will reach you in time to stop you from wasting your money on what amounts to beta stage software. Number 16, Pearl Harbor Defend the Fleet on PC. All three of you out there who remember WizardWorks' Beachhead 2002 will find that Pearl Harbor Defend the Fleet is exactly the same game with a different setting. For that matter, WizardWorks also has B-17 Gunner out right now, and this review could easily cover both. The graphics are only barely functional, although it's worth noting in fairness that the frame rate is rock steady. It's pretty mindless and more than a little mind-numbing. We can't imagine anyone playing this for more than 5 or 10 minutes. This game is bargain, priced at $19.99. But frankly, even that's about twice as much money as it's actually worth. Number 17, realMYST on PC. After 7 years and millions of copies, the original Myst is a gaming phenomenon unlike any other. People either love the game or they hate it, and neither side understands the other. However, realMYST is an update to the original that neither gives fans much new material nor offers anything to appeal to detractors. Every puzzle is identical to the original, the worlds are exactly the same, and the story hasn't been changed in any way either. To recap what we said so many years ago, the storyline, explained mostly by a library of books and some video, is fine, though it hinges on a game-long red herring and features no real ending. But it's the puzzles that make no sense and consist of nothing but pushing buttons, pulling levers, and hitting switches. With graphics problems, fans should stick with the original version. Non-fans should simply keep avoiding it. Number 18, Shrek on Xbox. This young, skewing platform adventure is kept from greatness by a few small things. Namely, bland, broken gameplay, an uncannily counterintuitive camera, unfocused, comically haphazard level designs and goals, and ho-hum sound. Simply put, this game sucks. The graphics are admittedly gorgeous. Nearly every texture of the game is beautifully bump mapped and looks incredible. In fact, Shrek may be the best tech demo we've ever played. But as a game in which you run around jumping, punching, kicking, carrying, and farting upon everything in sight, Shrek is Drac. Number 19, Silent Scope 2 on PlayStation 2. Here's a novel idea. Take an arcade gun game and port it to a home console with no light gun support. That kind of politically correct idiocy produced the original Silent Scope, which was so stupefyingly easy that it hardly mattered that the dual-shot control scheme was awful because you could beat the game anyway. But it's still the thinking behind this sequel, which is, as sequels tend to be, a lot harder. The result is a blueprint for frustration. The graphics are pretty bland with occasional slowdown. The characters are laughable, and the best thing you can say about the dialogue is that it's better than Zero Wing. This is just a waste of everyone's time and money. Number 20, Street Fighter EX3 on PlayStation 2. While the Street Fighter series has always been the benchmark for 2D fighting games, this hasn't held true for 3D. The first thing you'll notice about EX3 is the extremely plain graphics. Although the textures are nice and sharp, the character models and backgrounds are perfectly lackluster. Of course, graphics in a fighting game don't always reflect gameplay, but the sluggish controls remain unfixed. The EX series has always fallen short of the quality of many of the 2D Street Fighter games. However, if you're a fan, you probably won't be able to stop yourself from checking it out. Number 21, Surfing H3O on PlayStation 2. Surfing H3O began its life in Japan as Surfroids, an ugly game by anyone's reckoning that tried to grab gamers' interest with a unique control and some zany characters. A small finger surfboard comes with the game, which you attach to the analog sticks using your thumbs to control the surfers. An interesting premise, but it simply wasn't fun whatsoever. Sadly, the US release isn't much fun either. The gimmicky little surfboard is still there, and that's cool for about 2 minutes. But once the novelty is worn off, what you're left with is a game that's hard to control, uglier than most original PlayStation games, and arguably the worst PS2 game to appear stateside. Bottom line, one cute gimmick away from absolute crap. Number 22, The Simpsons Wrestling on PlayStation. In our E3 coverage last year, we named The Simpsons Wrestling one of the worst of show. Perhaps predictably, a year later, nothing has changed. Really. Imagine a ringside brawler where skill and finesse mean zip. Next, picture a set of pre-programmed special moves that serve up less impact than a midget grappler's drop kick. For the coup de grace, base everything on a combat model that operates according to staccato button mashing and little else. All this and more can be yours, complete with oh so mature signature moves like Barney's Belch or Apu's self-styled kick-ass kung fu. Ludicrously primitive gameplay and a botched concept will leave you punch-drunk and reeling for the ropes. In the immortal words of Homer, dope! Number 23, Timeline on PC. Michael Crichton may spew best-selling novels and blockbuster films from his pen like a veritable pop culture volcano, but if Timeline is anything to go by, he has some real work to do before he can equal those successes in the video game arena. Freely adapted from the novel of the same name, Timeline is truly one of the most lackluster releases to hit the PC in years. A pitiful combination of ugly visuals, dull gameplay, and less challenge than your average Teletubby title. This wretched trip to the Renaissance Fair should have been left on the bookshelf where it belongs. Number 24, Torneko, The Last Hope on PlayStation. As creators of the Dragon Warriors series, there's no doubt that Enix has RPG cred. However, does mastery of the old-school dungeon crawler justify this 16-bit looking game? Hell no! Chief among the game's many sins, your experience resets to 0 every time you leave a dungeon. So, with each new foray, once again, you have to struggle to quickly gain a few levels before being overwhelmed by wandering monsters. Lastly, certain enemies can incapacitate Torneko indefinitely. So, you're occasionally reduced to watching helplessly as a high-level Torneko gets pummeled to death by a giant carrot simply because it can't stop dancing. Forget it. And finally, number 25, World Destruction League, Thunder Tanks on PlayStation. With an interesting premise and a host of heavily armored tanks, World Destruction League could have been a fun, multiplayer shrapnel fest. What it ends up being, however, is a clumsy bore of a game. The game's problems are legion. There are 5 different modes, but you'd be hard-pressed to discern any real difference among them. The background graphics are ugly and flat, and the less said about the outrageous commentators, the better. A passable frame rate in single-player mode becomes a sloppy, blinking mess in split screen, making a 2-player match nearly unplayable. Derivative plots, poor production value, and watered-down content. Gee, TV shows in the future are the same as today's.
3DO. WDL main event, Thunder Tanks. In this corner, weighing in at 70 tons, the Patriot. And the Challenger, weighing 85 tons, Titan. The rules? There are no rules. When the bell rings, come out firing.
World Destruction goes prime time. New WDL Thunder Tanks, your devastation stick.
WDL Destruction.
Hey, thanks for watching our series finale of Next Generation's 1-star reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we have a whole playlist with all 7 episodes. You can go back to the first episode and look at how young and innocent the reviews were, and then just binge the whole thing. It'll take you around 3 hours or so. What else are you gonna do today? Now, here's the question I have for you. What was the meanest, nastiest, and snarkiest review of 2001? Oh man, the whole thing about exhuming Bob Kane was pretty great. Oh, and all the 989 hate. Plus, we finally get a MYST review after all of this. Let me see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back shortly with some Next Generation 1-star stats. We're gonna crunch the numbers and see what systems and publishers had the worst games. Plus, a whole lot more. It's a whole big thing we're gonna do. If that sounds good to you, then I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,